Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The Posh Club was packed to the brim. Today, a famous rock band was performing here, and rich spectators, who had booked tables in advance, were lazily sipping cocktails, smiling and chatting, shortening their time in the VIP zone. Fireworks. A young guy in branded ripped jeans and a Versus jacket plopped down on the empty seat. Oh, there's our Liam. A blonde girl in a dress, more like a combination, caught his shoulder with long shining fingernails and imprinted a long and bright kiss on his cheek. Where the hell are you? They're about to start. They won't start without me. Grinning, the boy replied, Fine him, fine him, fine him for being late. The girl shouted, Pour. Someone's obliging hands quickly filled the glasses with viscous, amber-colored liquid. Here you go, thank you. The guy tilted his head slightly and downed the contents in one fell swoop. Cheers, cheers. The audience echoed once again, supporting the simple toasts. And as if on cue, the duty musical accompaniment began to wane. The lights went out, except for the dim little table lamps on the VIP tables, and the stage was illuminated with bright flashes of rapidly changing electric lights. Quickly galloping, shaking guitars, performers jumped on stage, and the hall exploded with screams and squeals, banging and whistling. The audience sang along to the musicians with pleasure, especially at the table where sat a recently arrived guy, the owner of a bright appearance on which foolish, gullible girls bite so much. His whole life at a more or less conscious age had gone on brightly and viciously. He knew no denial or lack of anything, and whatever he desired was always entirely at his service, whether it was people or things. Liam, as he was called by his parents, was from a family of a financial tycoon, owner of factories, cars, steamships, in the words of a famous poet. From childhood, he was sure that the whole world was created for people like him, and of course, for him to a much greater extent. No one ever dared to contradict him. In a private kindergarten, if the teachers tried something timidly object to his pranks, they immediately lost their jobs. At home, his mother only wiped away tears, trying to instill in her son at least some norms of accepted behavior. And his father, a stern man with a rich criminal past, only encouraged the hair. He was sure that otherwise he would grow up to be a wimp. In this world, you need time to bring everyone to their knees before someone else does it to you. He often said to his growing son. The son learned his lesson to the fullest. Already in school, of course, also private, he so skillfully mocked the teachers that they, notwithstanding, changed like gloves. After school he studied abroad and in more than one place. In fact, in prestigious British universities, where you need not only to have a lot of money, but also to behave decently, Liam did not stay long. There, both he and his father were just politely shown the door, issuing, however, the appropriate documents on the completion of the number of semesters that he was able to hold out. And since he only needed a piece of paper for his education, nobody demanded anything more from him. A warm place under the sun, Liam, had already been secured before he was born, and the papers would be good enough to hang in a golden frame on the wall of a fancy office. Thus, having completed his education, the young major seamlessly and organically joined the community of the same, like himself, pro-lifers, regulars of nightclubs, regular buyers of elite boutiques, owners of expensive yachts and racing cars, the price tag of which was calculated by the same number of zeros, which equaled their rich inner world. During the day, these bats and predatory werewolves in branded rags sleep in their expensive caves, decorated according to the latest fashion, and towards evening, when the working people flock, Barely moving in kilometer-long traffic jams to their miserable shacks, the Majors come out into the light, which is no longer light, but a blue twilight, filled with the smell of wealth and luxury. This is how Liam's existence rolled along the dark nocturnal establishments, which sooner or later had to end in the same place where all other mortal beings find their last shelter. But the strongest of the world do not believe in it. They are touchingly sure that neither disease nor death itself has no power over them. And at this time in the provincial wilderness, in a village called Addicks, lived a simple American family. The core of the village, and the only workplace for a couple hundred residents, was a half-breed farm. The family of Jacob and Nancy produced 6 fairly healthy children, the oldest of whom was Kathy, the first in line and the first helper to her mother, worn out by endless hard work and incessant labor. From a young age, Kathy learned the hardship and beauty of a simple life in nature, away from the noise and smog of the metropolis. Even the center of the village seemed to her, accustomed to the simple monotonous routine of village life, sparkling fireworks of celebration. That's because they were there only on holidays. At agricultural fairs, where they sold honestly grown with their own hands, fruits and vegetables, and bought rare sweets, which had never been in their village, chocolates, and Eskimo. Kathy, even at the age of 15, rejoiced at this simple gift of fate like a child. At the same age, she was bought her first adult dress and shoes with heels, to wear to the disco, to the village club. "Look, Kathy," her mother told her. "Don't you dare grow up again. Your father and I won't change your outfit every year." Kathy only lowered her eyelashes obediently. She never paid her parents back. They saved on everything. Kathy's daily routine was to rise at 5:30, no matter what time of year it was, wash up with ice water from a bucket for half a minute, and feed the cattle, cows, pigs, goats. Then Mother went to milk, and Kathy at that time prepared breakfast for the whole family: porridge, boiled eggs, bread from yesterday's dough, emitted a huge bubble in a wooden bowl. There were enough troubles in the village, but there were good things too. Does life consist only of everyday life and difficulties? And snow slides and summer berries, a field of spaciousness, the smell of honey, strawberries, and herbs. How did you go mushrooming? What baskets did you carry? Carrot tops, shining caps with copper greens, were salted in large basins, transferred into fried glass jars and into the cellar. The closest of Kathy's family was an old grandmother, her father's mother. She lived in a separate half of the house and was widowed long ago. She also helped with the household, digging in the vegetable garden, as they say. Of all her grandchildren, Grandmother loved Kathy the most. She took her to her house for a sleepover, gave her tea with herbs, baked pancakes, and sometimes let her sleep in the morning. But most of all, Kathy loved her grandmother's stories. Grandmother knew a lot of stories about mermaids living in the pool, about unknown animals that deep in the forest buried, about mysterious creatures that live near us, behind the stove, under the bench, in old baths. Little Kathy listened to it, opening her mouth, and then retold it to her mother and the younger ones, for which her mother always scolded her grandmother, saying, "Why do you make a child's head up?" Growing up, Kathy did not hurry to share information, more and more whispered with her grandmother, and no one, not giving away the secrets learned. She collected herbs and berries with her, went for mushrooms far from home, and was not afraid to get lost. By the age of 20, she became a pretty girl with a long, thick braid and thoughtful gray eyes. And in the big city, life was boiling. After another board meeting, her father told Liam to stay late. Waiting until the office was empty and signaling to the secretary to bring drinks, he gestured to the leather chairs. "Sit down." Liam nonchalantly unfolded himself, lazily sipping his coffee. Now he's going to get his brains straightened out, he thought, but he had not expected how far his ancestor would go in that direction. It's time for you to settle down. You're already 30. His father had a habit of speaking in short, succinct sentences. We need to make a suitable match. What? I don't understand. It's time for you to get married. That's what? Father said angrily. Do you have anyone in mind? Liam was confused. There are plenty of such goodies. Father made an angry face. I'm not talking about tramps. There's always plenty of that. But Brown, you don't marry street girls. I hope you realize that. Yes. Liam nodded. He knew from experience that when his father was in such a mood, it was better not to contradict him. I'm waiting for your nomination. A little softer, his father said. She should be cute, but not too much and not spoiled. The latter, I emphasize, especially. We don't want other people's children. You never know what's in a woman's belly if she's slept with a lot of men before you. Where am I going to get one of those? Sincerely surprised. In our time, wherever you want. Father shouted. Not my concern. Any other questions? He squinted. Yes. The son nodded his head. How are you going to check that you're not spoiled? Because you're definitely going to. I know you are. You're right, nodded the father. But it won't be me, but the doctor. And if the girl doesn't agree to such conditions. Liam grinned. Then you'll look for another one. Shrugged his father. You have a month for everything, so do your best. When his son left the office, his father took a deep breath, went to the bar hidden in the wall, and poured himself an undiluted chivas, added ice, stirred, and walked to the huge window separating his office from the outside world. Behind this transparent wall life was boiling. The endless streams of the avenue crawled. People were walking back and forth, cranes, lifting their iron-long arms to the sky, and a narrow strip of concrete encased in the river glistened between this delightful bustle. James loved life, loved the movement, the hustle, loved to manage it all and punish those who made a bad fuss. He had gotten so caught up in running the world that he hadn't noticed his own role had come to an end. Only a few pages left, 6 months at best. He would never have grandchildren, but at least he would have made a beginning. That's how he decided to end his earthly managerial endeavors. Think about it. Meanwhile, Liam said to his friend, pouring tequila on his grief, now find him a girl who hasn't been kissed. What century does he live in? Should I look for her in kindergarten? I'm sick of your attitude. Why in the kindergarten? The interlocutor smirked. There are simpler options. You know, there are such fans, just this kind of strawberries. Well, Liam was interested. Where do they pick them? In the villages, he said, putting his foot on his leg and smiling. In the village clubs. In the village clubs? Liam had absolutely no idea what that was. His world consisted of metropolitan mazes, foreign resorts, and clean European towns. Look, his friend patiently told him. You take a car, type in the Navigator Rural Club, and choose some on the horns of hell there. You go there on Friday or Saturday night, and that's where they're herding. Are you sure? Liam frowned. How long would it take to get there? And if we use wings, what are you doing? My friend laughed. Wings do not fly there, if only wild geese. For real. Is there really such a thing? Liam thought, holding the leather steering wheel of his cool Audi with one hand. The old man's going mad. He drove off alone, so as not to embarrass himself by jabbing his finger into the middle of the list. There was a country club in Addicks. That's where he'd rushed off to get this idiotic task over with. He wasn't going to get married at all. Liam was really angry with his father, but there was nothing he could do about it. To hell with him, he'd get his own daughter-in-law if he had to. But I'm not going to jump around like a chained man. We'll sit in the house, as glued and children to do. That thought calmed the furious Liam down a bit. A few hours later, tired and sleep-deprived, he finally reached the end point of his route. He got out of the car and swore out loud. He had never seen such squalor before. The low one-story building made of gray, sometimes painted bricks, most of all resembled a stable. In his mind, of course. Enclosed by a low wooden fence painted a cheerful blue, it was hideous. Liam spat angrily and stepped closer. The peeling sign indicated that this was it. Sighing and reminding himself of his father, he stepped inside. "Who do you want?" The voice of an elderly aunt sitting at a table near the entrance made him wince, so confidently stony-faced was it. No one had ever dared to address him like that, but there was nothing to do, and he made a semblance of a smile on his face. "Do you have a disco here?" "Disco?" The aunt raised her painted eyebrows and smirked. "Well, here. But it's a bit early. Did you show up? You're not from around here?" "You look right. Kikimora." Liam snapped at her mentally. But he asked only when the beginning. When the young people have done all the work. The aunt laughed. "Maybe at 8 o'clock. Strange, I was told it starts early here." Liam grumbled. "Where is the nearest restaurant?" "Restaurant?" The janitor laughed. "What the hell?" Liam turned around and went to the car to wait for the disco to open. So he fell asleep, and when he opened his eyes it was already dark around, and all the windows in the club were shining brightly. Going into the dance hall, he expected to see anything but this. Between two low windows covered with faded yellow curtains, on a polished coffee table, stood a tape recorder, an old model he'd never seen before, and 2 speakers in wooden cases. On chairs along the walls sat girls in colorful dresses with curls and bright Barbie-style makeup. In the middle of a room the size of the bathroom of their mansion, on the creaky boardwalk floor, 3 couples were stomping in a slow dance. The guys were openly groping the girls, and they were giggling and making eyes at them. At the sight of the guy who entered, all heads turned toward him. The girls' eyes rounded, the guys tensed. Liam walked in silently and sank down on a vacant chair with worn upholstery. The chair beneath him crunched suspiciously. "What am I doing here?" Liam thought in anguish and rage, looking frankly at the astonished girls sitting next to him. The farther ones were whispering and giggling, looking at each other and covering their mouths with their palms, and those closer to him sat like at a funeral, eyes down, hands on their knees. Inviting those who don't dance. His friend's instruction flashed through his head, and he stood up resolutely, walking along the row of seated girls. "May I invite you?" Leaning over and putting out his arm bent at the elbow, he said to the first one with a long braid. You could sweep the floor, he thought, at the sight of this luxurious and natural maiden's jewelry. She looked up at him with serious eyes. "Me?" There was surprise and even fear in her voice. "You." He confirmed it with a radiant smile. The girl cautiously rose shyly, hiding her hands in the folds of her dress. Liam didn't have much idea how to dance to such strange things coming from the rattling speakers, but it was easy. Hugging his chosen one and shuffling his feet from one end of the room to the other, he soon achieved the same results as everyone else. The next song gave out at a different tempo, and everyone seated gradually joined in the dancing. Fidgeting to such music, Liam was no longer able and suggested to his lady to go out for a smoke. "I don't smoke." Shyly, she said, lowering her eyes again. Really? Liam marveled. Looks like the right specimen. It went through his head. Let's just get some air, shall we? He said and led her away to the blue fence. Let's get acquainted. I'm Liam. Kathy, she said quietly and blushed. Liam marveled. He lit a cigarette, blowing the smoke away so it wouldn't blow in her face, and he didn't know what to talk to her about. Where are you from? She asked after a while. I haven't seen you here before. From the city, he said. It was necessary to keep incognito for the time being, so as not to scare off any frightened prey. I'm here as a guest. Instead of answering, she only smiled, in that simple way that only his mother smiled at him. Her eyes, it seemed, could be searched to the very bottom of his soul and see nothing there but the same things on the surface. You know, Kathy. Liam was about to tell an inspired lie, but he didn't know how to approach it. I have to go now, but I'll be back for sure. And after a pause, he added, lowering his voice and looking her in the eye, to you. The next day, the whole neighborhood was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. In some century, in their remote corner, there had been at least some worthwhile event. The arrival at the village club of a strange guy in a fancy car here was tantamount to the arrival of a prince under scarlet sails. The fact that Kathy was playing the part of Assel only added fuel to the fire, for she was considered by a small margin ahead of Cindy, the prettiest girl in this little world. Did you hear that, girls? Wendy the saleswoman was singing. Kathy, we've got a prince. Oh, it's no good. Kathy's grandmother lamented. Princes don't just appear out of the blue. Why are you talking about bad things, Grandma? Kathy smiled, comforting her. Besides, I'm not going to go out with him. It doesn't matter. Sorrowed Grandma. Believe me, I've seen a lot of them. Meanwhile, Liam was consulting with the very friend who had taught him where to find a decent bride. Okay, here we go. Kevin said, tell her that you're looking for a man with a pure soul who could heal your wounded heart, but without too many details, that she's the one you've been looking for all your life. And most importantly, that she and she alone could save you. Why save me? What a load of crap. The consequences of unhappy love, brother. Kevin laughed. From what else? I can't believe she'd fall for a divorce like that. You'll see. His buddy laughed shortly. Can we bet, if you're ready? Fuck you. Liam waved his hand. We don't have enough to do. A week later, he came again and told Kathy everything Kevin had taught him. But again, she just looked at him with her knave eyes and smiled. Kathy, putting as much tender feeling into his voice as he was even capable of, Liam looked at her with a long, penetrating stare. Kathy, look at me. I'm just not myself. I don't eat. I don't drink. I don't sleep. Take pity on me, please. What do you want? The girl flapped her eyes in confusion. Well, for starters, I want us to get on a first-name basis. Liam smiled. How about it? Come on. Kathy smiled embarrassedly. And this time Liam left with nothing and was getting a little pissed off. His father only gave him 1 month, and this village idiot, even you, can't tell him. How could it be before the wedding? Together with Kevin, they decided that it was time to use the heavy artillery to get acquainted with his parents. Now Liam did not wait for the next weekend and arrived in the middle of the week, having found out in the administration, Kathy address, and came right to the court. He, of course, almost threw up from the unfolding picture of simple village life, but he courageously restrained himself. He took out of the car a huge bouquet of roses for his mother-in-law, a bottle of Chivas for his father-in-law, a whole bag of sweet nonsense for Kathy, and another bouquet of white roses for her, and a small, modest box. In the box was a ring, and her mother only gasped when she saw the gem. Kathy, Liam pictorially dropped to one knee, thinking only of how not to kill the suit pants. I fell in love with you at first sight. All girls pale before your beauty. Please, will you marry me? His chosen one was standing in the middle of the common room, completely confused. The whole scene didn't fit the interior of their rustic cottage, but it was the same with Cinderella and Prince Charming. Don't even think about it, her mother persuaded her. Happiness will come to you. Do you really want to spend your whole life here, just like me? Look around you. You're looking at the same thing here. Shoveling manure and having babies. Good man, daughter, solid, said the father, looking at the cupboard where his wife had thoughtfully put the coveted bottle. What else to expect? Such are not lying on the road, and only Grandma remained true to herself. Kathy, ask your heart, and you'll know if you need such a fate. This man doesn't seem real to me. Where did he even come from? Kathy honestly recounted to her grandmother everything Liam had told her. I don't know. The old woman frowned. He doesn't look unhappy. Oh, he didn't. What's the rush? Kathy didn't know what she was thinking or what she really wanted. Really, this is my only chance to get out of here, she thought to herself. When she thought of Liam, however, her heart was absolutely calm, and she felt nothing but flattering pleasure at the fact that such an interesting and wealthy young man had chosen her out of all the girls in the world. You'll be a fool if you don't leave, her friend Molly told her. If I had such an offer, I would not think for a second. And so it came to pass that Kathy was of the same opinion. You don't turn down a chance like this, and rightly so, Molly assured her. So what if you don't like it? Divorce and that's that. We do not live in the Middle Ages. Almost at the end of his father's deadline, Liam finally persuaded Kathy to go and meet his parents. Seeing her in the same dove dress, he wrinkled his nose in displeasure. Put on something else, something more modern. There's nothing else. Kathy was embarrassed and tears came to her eyes. All right, it's nothing. Liam caught himself, afraid of scaring her off again. We'll go with you to the store and you'll choose something yourself. He took her to an expensive boutique where Kathy was completely confused. For one thing, it was only on the way that she found out where he was taking her. And then she had never traveled further than the center of the village in her life. Even the town next to the village was almost space to her, not like Los Angeles itself. The savvy consultants, seeing the situation, took the couple in stride and dragged Kathy into the fitting room, leading her, like a fashion show, to Liam. As a result, a classic cut suit with a skirt was approved because the girl absolutely refused to wear pants. Liam looked critically at her pale, bare legs, but however, slender and not badly shaped, and decided that a week or two in a good cosmetology salon would make something acceptable out of her. They took a bag, sunglasses, a silk handkerchief and gloves, and the salesman, very happy with today's proceeds, smiled at them with dazzling fake smiles. Hello. Kathy smiled politely at Liam's parents, her eyes wide open, looking around the chic mansion. Hello, darling. Her mother stepped towards them, hugging her future daughter-in-law affectionately. Good afternoon. Father seemed to look approvingly, or Liam only wanted it that way. Let's go to the table. The mother invited her son with Kathy. The servants have already set everything long ago. We've been waiting for you. We've stopped by, Liam said, sinking contentedly into a soft chair. That's why we were delayed. Lunch was tolerable, Mother kept asking Kathy about her family, about her parents, about where she studied. Her father listened, occasionally throwing in a line or two, raising an eyebrow. Kathy splayed her hands, apologized, and ran out from the table into the hallway where her bags of belongings stood. Returning a moment later, she handed Liam's mother a small bundle. "Please take this. I embroidered it myself." Blushing, she almost whispered, "A gift for you." Vanessa shrieked, ran in, hopped Kathy, spread the rug on the small table. Women, what can you take from them? After lunch, she and Kathy went out into the garden, and from there came the same delighted gasps. Only now the girl was admiring the flower beds and fountains, and Liam and her father were in the smoking room, opposite the big English window. "Well then," said James, "you've met the deadline." "Well done, but for God's sake, tell me, what swamp did you fish her out of?" "What difference does it make?" Liam shrugged. "The main condition is fulfilled. She's absolutely clean." "It seems so." Agreed, father. "Now we have to take care of the formalities." "Do I have to do that too?" Liam jumped up. "You could be the one to do it." Father grinned. "But I'm afraid you'd fail miserably." "No, I've put my mother in charge. She's a woman and she can find the right words. And then you'll have to sign a prenup. You think that's going to be okay?" "I don't think she'll even ask what the paper in front of her is." Liam grinned contemptuously. "Good," nodded his father. "Now for the main thing." Liam was wary. Try hard to get Kathy pregnant as soon as possible." Father said tiredly, "Do you understand me?" "But what's not to understand?" Liam stretched himself. "We'll do it." "But what's the rush?" "None of your business." Father snapped at me. "My mother and I want grandchildren. Consider it a parental whim." The wedding was scheduled in a week. All the necessary formalities went really quite smoothly. Vanessa, who had managed to find a common language with Kathy, convinced her of the necessity of the examination procedure. And she didn't read the prenup, just as Liam had predicted. But not because she didn't understand, no, she understood perfectly well that rich parents didn't want their property to fall into the wrong hands. But it seemed to her not as an offense, but as an additional proof of Liam's seriousness of intentions. He is not afraid of parental anger, marrying a girl from the village, who, of course, everyone considers a hunter of other people's goods, but not him. Her chosen one is not like that. He is kind and noble, and he loves her. Why else would he have her? There are 1,000 girls in front of him, all ready to run at the drop of a hat. Oh, if Kathy knew why this family needed her. These people didn't think of any love at all, least of all Liam. Maybe only his mother had any feelings for her future daughter-in-law, and her father needed her, very much, but only as a perfect incubator. Kathy's relatives were not invited to the ceremony. It was explained to her that it was not their custom. Liam promised her to go to her parents and other relatives afterwards to organize a real village wedding. Promised and forgot. Kathy's mother cried. Her father yelled and freaked out, but Liam quickly calmed them down with some money handed over in an envelope, telling them it was for upcoming wedding expenses. After considering how much they had been allocated for expenses, the mother immediately calmed down, smiled, and agreed to everything. The father, who received a case of whiskey in addition to the expenses, was no longer upset. Well, it is clear they are all cool city people. We are no match for them. Let them, and we'll celebrate in our own way. They had to celebrate without the young people, who immediately after the city wedding flew to a distant foreign resort. Kathy sent pictures that took the whole village by surprise. How lucky some people are, sighed enviously friends. What a lottery ticket. Dan, but why did he choose her? Kathy herself was as if in a parallel universe. In 1 month, her whole life had changed 180 degrees. She was now a married woman, and her husband, who looked like a foreign movie actor, had thrown the whole world at her feet. At least it seemed that way to her. After the Italian resort, they returned to Los Angeles, where a new mansion, a little smaller than her parents', but no less chic, was waiting for them. Father and mother, welcoming their son and his wife to their home, inquired casually whether they could expect grandchildren soon. Kathy became embarrassed, turned pink, and lowered her eyes but said nothing. At home, Liam asked her, "Why did you react like that to a simple question?" She blushed again, just as she had the first time they met. It was her strange peculiarity, Liam thought, that irritated him a little at times, and quietly she answered, "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure." No way! Liam was so happy he fussed, sat her in the chair, looked into her eyes, and even ordered the servant to bring tea and milk. "That's great." He looked at her with such joyful eyes that Kathy cried from happiness. "But you're sure now?" "Yes," she nodded. "Let's go to the doctor tomorrow and find out for sure, okay?" Liam already imagined how he would solemnly present to his father the proof of his male achievements. The fact that he would soon become a father himself didn't excite Liam much. In fact, he was getting a little tired of Kathy. All these silly raptures on any occasion, absolute unsuitability for modern life. She even tried to clean the hotel. But here, could any normal person imagine such a thing? He remembered the face of the maid who had come to the room and found the rich guest dusting. It wasn't that Kathy disgusted him at all. Sometimes she was quite nice. All this naive innocence of hers had fascinated him at first, but the farther she was with him, the more he became irritated by her rudeness, her stupid simplicity, her complete lack of elementary ideas about anything. It was very stressful that everything had to be explained to her, chewed up the simplest, most obvious things. Yes, she didn't even know how to use a smartphone and woke up awfully early, disturbing his sleep, and in the evening she gave him no rest, dragging him from the bar to the hotel room, whining like a little girl. "Well, can we go now, honey?" "Don't call me that." One day he couldn't take it anymore and shouted at her. "What do you think I am, honey?" "Just call me Liam, whatever you say." Kathy readily agreed, and that annoyed him too. Her constant desire to please, to anticipate his every wish like an intrusive servant. "Lion, do you want tea? I can go and get it. The waiter brings the tea here." "And no, I don't want tea." "Waiter, a glass of Beaujolais, per favor." Kathy was embarrassed to go to the beach in her swimsuit. Liam literally dragged her out blushing like a cancer. They're all watching. Kathy looked at the people around her with tears in her eyes. Eventually converged on the floor transparent Perio. Liam felt like a loser who had married an ugly woman. Although Kathy was quite beautiful, and if she had been able to present herself, it would have been great, but that option was not available to her. And there were many other small details that were accumulating like a snowball. That's why today, when Liam learned that everything had worked out, and it was possible to give his father a ready report, so to speak, he rejoiced like a child. And Kathy thought he was happy as a child, without any how. Great son! James was indeed pleased with his report. They met in the office one-on-one. Liam wanted to present this news without Kathy, who was, in fact, only a tool to achieve the goal. And now that goal had been achieved, one could use something more serious for such news. My father was looking at the ultrasound photos, specially enlarged in A4 format. Liam had thought of it himself, specially asked the doctors. You know, my father has poor eyesight, and I want to make the old man happy. Kathy again saw this as a touching family concern and smiled happily. You know, I have unexpected news for you. The woman doctor smiled, raising her eyes from the monitor. Look here. They both scrutinized the screen, not finding anything at all clear to them. Right here, see. The woman pointed with a special wand, like a short pointer. There should be one heartbeat here. But we have two. She finished solemnly. Liam stared dumbly at the screen, not understanding anything, and Kathy, suddenly realizing the meaning of what had been said, gave her stupid habitual gasp and clamped her mouth shut, holding back happy sobs. We're having twins. Yes, and different egg twins at that, nodded the doctor. What? Liam was worried when he heard the terms he didn't understand at all. Don't worry, there is nothing wrong with them. The doctor smiled. They just developed from two different eggs and will not look like twins. They may even be opposite sexes. Oh my God, Kathy was overjoyed. We are going to have two babies, Liam. She had forgotten that she shouldn't even call him that. But now he had something to surprise his father with. Don't you see anything strange here? He asked him, grinning. What should I see? James was wary, sensing a trick. But I don't know. Liam said, for example, that you'll soon be the grandfather of not one, but two grandchildren. Really? My father just soared above the sinful earth. He made the old man happy. He even hugged his son, which he hadn't done for a long time. And I think he even wept, or was it just Liam? Adriana, he rushed to the intercom. Adriana, my soul, brave us here the best champagne from that stock. Son, the old man was shining like a shiny coin. Son, you don't know how pleased I am. To tell you the truth, I doubted that you would be able to accomplish my little errand so quickly. But I was wrong, and for the first time in my life, I'm glad I was wrong. Ask all you want for such great news. That collector's Mustang, remember? Liam squinted. No problem. James threw up his hands. Not a question at all. The seductive Adriana, smiling and shooting her eyes at Liam, brought a fogged bucket with a green gold bottle. Here you go. Did you have a good deal? She asked, seeing that the chief was in a good mood. Oh yes, James said. A very, very good one. Well, son, he raised his glass as soon as the door closed behind the secretary. To our family. Liam joined in the toast with gusto. The champagne was indeed excellent. The next day we had a family get-together with our relatives. The mother was delighted, as was the father, and she took Kathy to her room, and they clucked like two hens. Liam was generally very surprised to see his mother. Surely she had no country roots? The two of them had gotten together very quickly. Grandchildren. The father rumbled all over the hill. Two grandchildren at once. Wow, respect for the old man. Kathy's pregnancy went well. Village women with strong immune systems rarely had trouble bearing children. Liam expected her to become cranky and irritable like everyone in her position, but she hadn't changed a bit. She was still up early and eager to be active. She planted in the yard of the mansion a whole vegetable garden, digging in neat beds, treating her husband with ripe strawberries and young potatoes. But her husband was less and less at home, absorbed in the delights of his former free life. Kathy with her housekeeping and simple family pleasures, he was already madly bored. He became more and more annoyed to see her neatly coiffed and dressed in a homemade dress and impeccably ironed apron, fiddling in the kitchen, preparing dinners, baking pancakes. Lion was sick of seeing her contented face, of hearing her humming silly songs. Even the smell of her country food became disgusting to him at times, and he left home for a familiar old-time restaurant. Ordered sushi and a warm arugula salad. Another cocktail, met with old acquaintances, sat lazily sprawled out, and listened to the usual coddling of street girls. He was well in his native familiar element, and did not want to return to this cozy house, cleaned by the efforts of a young, diligent wife. Damn, what a mess he'd gotten himself into. But no, he was not going to lead the bland life of a married man. He, Liam, will be, and will remain free. He would, as before, do what he wanted, take what was rightfully his, the rich women, the booze, the cars, and this village fool, nothing more than a domestic servant. But what annoyed him most of all was that Kathy never complained about anything. He wasn't at home all day long. Only occasionally he came in the morning, as they called it, on the horns and fell like a log into bed. Closer to dinner, with a woozy head, he would crawl to the first floor, where warm food, delicious tea, and his wife's smile were always waiting for him. Sometimes she worked in the vegetable garden, despite her big belly. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes she knitted or sewed. Sometimes she read on the terrace or in the garden. But never once did he find her idly lying on the sofa or watching television. The latest model of iPhone, which he had given her on their honeymoon, was always in the same place, carefully packed in a case so that it wouldn't spill out. For some reason, that fact annoyed Liam the most. "Why aren't you on the phone?" He reprimanded her during his rare moments at home. "I'm just doing some chores." Kathy justified herself shyly. "What if I need something urgently and I can't reach you?" "I'll probably hear you." "That's right, you probably would." "And I still haven't installed any messenger." "Do I have to text you like an idiot?" "Why?" Sincerely surprised Kathy. "If you need something, you can call and tell me. You're the one who can." Liam got upset. "But I'm a businessman, Vissy. You understand? It is often inconvenient for me to talk. I have business meetings and negotiations. Then can you please make me this messenger?" She asked him belittlingly. "Well, you give." Liam grinned. "Like a 100-year-old grandmother, let's do it yourself with your hands. At the same time, you will learn how to do it like all normal people." "But like me?" "Look on the internet." He cut her off and left. There was nothing to do, so she had to learn the internet and all sorts of messengers. The whole day, poor Kathy tortured herself trying to install on her phone different wise programs and applications, tired beyond belief. It all took away from her as much energy as she had never spent on any, even the most difficult housework. "Oh my gosh," she thought, "if their lives are so complicated, if everything Liam does takes so much energy, no wonder he's so tired and irritable. There must be some way to help him." But what can she do? Here in the house, it's just her and one other female au pair. True Kathy, accustomed to handling her own household, almost never asked her for anything herself. Only lately, when her stomach had gotten too much in the way, had the woman helped her in the garden. Maybe she knows something about these mobile wisdoms? "Wendy?" Kathy turned uncertainly to the housekeeper, who was sitting in a wicker chair on the terrace, sipping coffee and leafing through a magazine. "What?" Kathy turned around. "Can I help you?" "Wendy, you wouldn't happen to know how to handle this, would you?" "I know a little bit, like everyone else." She shrugged her shoulders. "Come on, what do you need?" Wendy was an ace compared to Kathy. She felt like a fish in water in the virtual world. She quickly taught the hostess all the subtleties of handling the iPhone. but she was not familiar with the laptop. And you go to a special course. She advised Kathy. They will teach you everything. Kathy thought about it. She had thought of self-education more than once. If now she lives in a big city, so it is necessary to try to somehow adapt here to get accustomed to these new conditions. Otherwise, she'll be a village idiot. When the children grow up, they'll be ashamed to have such a stupid mother. True, earlier she did not know how to approach it, but now she was going to do everything in her power. So when her father-in-law arrived once again and brought the doctor with him, he was very concerned about the medical part of Kathy's pregnancy. She shyly asked him, "James, I would like to enroll in a computer course. Why would you want to do that?" The man wondered. To keep up with everyone else. Kathy explained, "Liam says I don't know how to do anything." "Ah, Liam?" The father-in-law stretched out. "I'll talk to him. And you, my dear, remember that now your main task is your children, my grandchildren. You should not overwork and sit near the monitor pregnant, harmful. Understand, when you give birth, when the kids grow up, then you're welcome. You can learn computer literacy and whatever else you want. Right, doctor?" He turned to the doctor. Their family doctor nodded, confirming James' words, and added, "With your permission, I would recommend Kathy's hospitalization in the clinic altogether." "Why?" James was concerned. "Is something threatening to the babies?" "Not threatening, no." The doctor hastened to assure him. But at this stage of the pregnancy, all sorts of unexpected things can happen at any time. And although Kathy is perfectly healthy and feeling well, both she and the babies should be under round-the-clock medical supervision. "That's something we can't provide at home." "Of course not." My father-in-law agreed. "Come on, Kathy. Let's go to the clinic." "For how long?" Kathy was confused. "Now until the birth." The doctor said firmly. He didn't want to have to answer to James if anything happened, and the clinic was more reliable. And although the girl was healthy and strong, it would never hurt to be reassured. When they were already in the car, Kathy quietly turned to her father-in-law. "James?" "Yes," he mumbled, not looking away from the screen of his smartphone. "Don't be too hard on Liam. He's not angry. He's worried about me, that he won't be able to contact me if he needs to." The man looked at her carefully and nodded, smiling slightly. What astonishing naivete and gullibility, he thought, and in his callous soul. First of all, her strict upbringing was having an effect. Secondly, in front of her eyes stood, as an example of her parents' life together, in which there was no place for tenderness and unnecessary sentiment. But still Kathy hoped and believed that Liam gave all his strength to work, caring for their well-being. Ah, if she had seen those very conditions and especially the implements of labor. But fortunately for her, for the time being, this dark side of their lives was safely hidden. And behind the high fence of the perinatal clinic, nothing threatened her and her children. She continued to feel fine. All her tests were normal, and nothing particularly bothered her, but she had a lot of free time on her hands, too much. For this reason she had, quite unnoticed by herself, gotten quite good at the internet and social networks. She could already communicate. She laughed for a long time at the emoticons when she discovered them. She had a lively correspondence with Wendy about the household she had left behind, and even set up Instagram on her own. But her whole, pure nature didn't give her a chance to get bogged down in sticky and utterly pointless videos. Therefore, her best entertainment was reading, listening to audiobooks, radio shows, and watching movies. But even these activities didn't take her entirely away. She walked a lot, remembering that children need fresh air, and in bad weather she sat wrapped in a warm blanket on the wide open balcony and drank hot tea. A little later, Kathy discovered that it was possible to learn computer literacy remotely. She gingerly asked her mother-in-law to bring her a laptop, promising that she would not spend too much time at the monitor, and the mother-in-law honored her request. Liam's mother, in general, in her own way attached to this kind and naive girl. After all, she gave her warmth and joy of communication, which she was completely deprived of in her family. At one time, Vanessa regretted that she had not given birth to another child besides her son, and it would have been possible to have several. The material conditions allowed already then, in the distant years of their youth with James. She really wanted a girl, a daughter, but her husband was not particularly in favor, and somehow it didn't work out. So now, having found in her daughter-in-law Kathy a loving and trusting soul, she was only glad. She has no daughter-in-law, but she has an affectionate and honest daughter-in-law, and soon she will have 2 grandchildren. Thinking of this, Vanessa, more than once, cried joyfully. 2 beautiful little lumps, her blood, the continuation of the family. The sex of the future twins, doctors, strangely enough, have not yet been able to find out. At each ultrasound, the babies turned to face each other, and all the most necessary places were inaccessible to the scanner. They don't want us to know in advance who will be born. Kathy said with a laugh, "I don't care, as long as they're both healthy." And Vanessa shared her opinion, hoping, however, that at least one of the babies would be a girl. She had already had the experience of raising a boy, a sad experience. What had she and James done wrong? Why had Liam grown up like that? Though deep down, of course, she knew why. The permissiveness that her husband practiced had had such an effect on the child's fragile soul, and she was very much afraid that the same thing might happen to her grandchildren. James was afraid of something else, that he wouldn't live to see his grandchildren born. Every day he was giving up more and more, and his wife began to notice it. He held on only on the medications he was given every day at the day hospital and on his iron will. Lung cancer in the last stage, no longer operable, and although the doctors from the very beginning, as the terrible diagnosis, gave him no more than 6 months, he has already held out more. And there were only 2 months left before his grandchildren were born, only 2 months. He wanted to see them so badly. This desire had become his obsession, to see their continuation, to see if they were like him, like his kind, to know that his blood was in them. Then he could die in peace, and he had no intention of giving up. Yes, the birth of these babies was eagerly awaited by most of the family, but not by their birth father. After a conversation with their father, when he'd said to him, "Why are you making your wife nervous? What she needs right now is some peace and quiet," he got even angrier. So his father didn't need him, Liam, not only the Kathy incubator, but he himself was nothing more than a tool for his father to ensure the continuation of the species, damn him, and Liam is off to the races. His hard work, which Kathy so often thought of with gratitude, consisted of uncontrollable drinking and daily social gatherings, where he often dabbled in drugs. Collector's Mustang, a gift from his father, he had already slightly broken, and so drove with a crumpled fender. There was no time to bring it to the service. The tools of his labor were slutty girls. While Kathy was at home, he didn't bring anyone there for fear of his father's anger. Now that she was hospitalized and the rookery, in the lingo of his circles, was free, he did not hesitate one day to bring his catch directly into the marital bedroom. At noon, Wendy nearly broke the dishes when she saw a half-naked girl in a Kathy robe open to the floor coming down the stairs. "What's for breakfast?" she asked, lighting a long, thin cigarette. That same evening, Wendy packed up her things and left. She wrote to Kathy that she was quitting for family reasons. Kathy was upset. Who would keep the house in order while she was away? Told her mother-in-law the next time she saw her. Vanessa, suspecting something wrong, went to the mansion to see what was wrong. The morning her son was supposed to have his 10th dream in his bed. He was indeed there, but in the same bed was also lying another girl. And there were empty bottles on the carpet. "Get up," Vanessa commanded, pouring the rest of the contents of one of the bottles on the head of the uninvited guest. "Ouch!" She shrieked and jumped up, batting her eyes. "Who are you?" "Mom." My son's eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" "I came to visit." Kindly explained the woman, sitting down on the chair. "To see how you're doing with the household. The housekeeper left you." "What is she?" Lion was surprised. "I'll tell you what." Finally, the mother boiled up. "And then I'll tell your father, too." "Let's see how you'll sing then." "Do you have any idea how you're insulting your wife with your behavior? The mother of your future children. And what will happen if she finds out about your outrageous behavior?" That's it. Lion fought back against his mother. "Stop yelling, she was just leaving." If only this could solve all your problems. Vanessa sighed. "I don't have any problems except for you." Lion shouted in anger. "I'm sick of your moralizing. I'm a grown man and I can live my life the way I want to." "Of course you can," nodded his mother. "But only at your own expense. Don't forget." Lion shrank back a little. "Let's make a deal like this." Vanessa said to her son, "that there will be no more outrage in the house. I can't control your whole life. I don't need to. But Kathy and your children deserve much better treatment, so you will no longer throw out the servants and bring your girls here. Look, if I ever hear about this again, I'll tell my father and he'll take away your allowance. I hope you understand me well?" "Yes," Lion mumbled. "I do. I couldn't be better." "Good." Vanessa got up from her chair. "Oh, and don't forget to call Wendy and bring her back. When Kathy comes in with the babies, the place should be in perfect order." James was lying in a hospital bed at the daycare center, covered in tubes. It was a good thing all his hair had come out a long time ago, and now he didn't have to explain the sudden baldness to anyone, whenever it happened. "Oh, this is so lousy." The pounding in his temples, the ringing in his ears, the darkness in his eyes, but he seemed to be holding on for now. How much longer? How long does he have? Who can say? As if hearing his thoughts, the doctor entered the room. "How are we doing, James?" "Not so good. I have to say that with your diagnosis and the length of treatment, you're still hanging in there. Good for you." The doctor smiled encouragingly. "But unfortunately, the latest tests." "What?" "I'm finished?" James grinned sadly. "You need to go to a hospital." The doctor said trustingly, "so that we can give you round-the-clock care." "In other words, lay down to die," sighed James. "No, you won't." He got out of bed, but not as quickly as he would have liked. He felt dizzy and had to grab the headboard to catch his breath. "James, where are you going?" "You can't." The doctor started, but the stubborn patient did not listen to him and dialed the chauffeur's number. 5 minutes later, he was escorted to the car, and in another 20 minutes, he was already in the perinatal clinic. "Hello, daughter-in-law." Roughly and cheerfully, he said, "Kathy," opening the door. "Good afternoon." Kathy smiled. How good of them to warn me of a visitor. She rejoiced a moment ago, barely having time to hide her laptop. "How are you doing in here?" Her father-in-law stepped closer to her to kiss her cheek. and she involuntarily felt the pungent hospital spirit emanating from him. "Are you not feeling well?" she asked, looking into his gaunt face, into the dark circles under his eyes. "I can't hide anything from you." James laughed and immediately coughed, shaking from the painful spasms. After a little while, he got his breath back and began to speak. "I did not want to tell any of you, so as not to upset or frighten you. But my days are numbered, Kathy. The doctors have only given me 6 months to live, and I'm already 2 years too long. My last wish is to see my grandchildren while I'm still alive. Don't interrupt me, please." He made a hand sign, seeing that she was about to say something to him. "Let me finish. So, Kathy, since I can hardly hold them in my arms anymore, I must at least do what I can for them and for you too. So I've decided to make a will. It'll be done in the most honorable way possible. Most of my fortune will go to my grandchildren, and you will manage their estate until they are 18 years old. But why me and not Liam?" Kathy couldn't help but interject. She had always been taught not to interrupt her elders, but this speech had struck her, stirred her. "Liam?" My father-in-law smirked sadly and wickedly. "I will not forget him either. He is my son, after all. But I'll tell you frankly, Kathy, I'm not sure he can handle my financial empire. You don't realize the size of it, and relax, you'll have help managing your children's fortunes. I have a trusted staff and lawyers who will draw up the paperwork in a way that won't hurt a mosquito. So, I ask you one thing. Promise me, girl, that you will do everything in your power, and even beyond that, to bring up my grandchildren worthy people." "Of course I will," Kathy said hotly. "Of course, Daddy, don't worry about that. James and Vanessa will be brought up in love and strictness." "What?" My father-in-law couldn't believe his ears. "What did you say? Or did I mishear?" "No." His daughter-in-law smiled at him. "You heard right, Daddy. We're naming them James and Vanessa. I'm not as stupid as everyone thinks I am, and I'm well aware that this is all." She waved her hand around. "All these opportunities, it's all you're doing. And your wife, she is also a very good person. I love her like my own mother." "Daughter." What father-in-law, embracing her and pressing his wrinkled wet cheek. "Daughter, but where are you from?" "I know," Kathy assured him. "I know it's a boy and a girl. Mommy always knows these things. That's how Vanessa caught them when she entered the room. They were crying and hugging each other. Of course, they told her about her husband's illness, because there was nothing to hide. In general, she was going to tell James about her son's outrageous behavior and looked for him in the office, where she was told that he had gone to the clinic to Kathy. But now, of course, that conversation never happened. Together with Kathy, they did persuade "This is William," said the father-in-law to his daughter-in-law. "He'll be helping you with all your business. You have some papers to sign now. Can I read them?" Kathy asked. "Of course, Kathy," nodded William. "If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them all. And please, just call me William." Kathy carefully read everything that needed to be signed. "Do I understand correctly that you, Dad, are appointing me CEO of your company?" She wondered. "After all, I am only a woman, and I have no education, and then, what about Liam? It is my right to appoint as the head of my own company whoever I see fit." Her father-in-law interrupted her with the same unappealing tone. "Liam is not up to the task, to my great regret, but you, with the help of William and other loyal employees, can. You, as the representative of my grandchildren, will have a controlling interest. And please don't tell my husband yet. I'll tell him myself." Kathy left her father-in-law almost in shock. No, of course she had already begun to suspect that Liam was not as fond of her as she had thought at first. He never showed up at the clinic again. He didn't answer her calls and messages, and Wendy told her some things. Kathy cried all night, but by nature, strong in body and spirit, she calmed down and accepted it in the morning. After all, she had never once seen in the village with her own eyes the same unearthly love that is written about in books and dreamed of by every girl. But Kathy? When he woke up, he didn't immediately remember what had happened in the morning. "How long have you been here?" "I dozed off." "Did you sleep well, Daddy?" his daughter-in-law asked him. "I'm glad. Now let's drink this. Who was here with you just now?" James finally remembered. "Some old woman, a little woman?" "That's my grandmother. She came at my request. I hope you don't mind." She still called her father-in-law by her first or second name, depending on the situation. Baba Kathy can heal with herbs and hands, remove spoil, help with the evil eye. She cured my younger brother of a stupor. People come from all over the neighborhood to see her, and she never refuses anyone. "You know, I feel better today," James replied. It was as if he had forgotten his original question. "I feel invigorated. What did you give me to drink?" "Herbal tincture." Kathy smiled. "Thyme, chamomile, St. John's wort, soothing." "It really soothes." My father-in-law perked up. "And even, kind of invigorating." "Well, how are you?" "What do the doctors say?" "How long do we have to wait?" "Not much longer." "Another week, maybe a week and a half." "Oh, I wish we could wait," sighed my father-in-law. "I wish we could wait." But that evening Kathy felt a pain in her lower abdomen. At first a tugging, exhausting pain, then sharp, like a knife stabbing. Startled out of her wits, she pressed the staff call button. What? A nurse came in and saw Kathy and splashed her hands. "Looks like it started. It's too early, too early." Kathy moaned, lifting herself up on the bed. "Ouch! What's that?" Her water broke. The nurse said, pulling back the sheet, "Call the midwives." "Oh my goodness, get up, get up." "That's it, and let's walk around the room. It will be easier and faster. If the pain is sharp, lean on the bed, but do not lie down, do not lie down." "Okay?" "Yeah." Kathy nodded. "It feels better." "It's supposed to. It's all right, but it's going to hurt. It's normal, just bear with it." By 1 o'clock in the morning, Kathy refused the anesthesia, thinking it would hurt the babies. No, it won't. The impact is minimal. The doctors persuaded her, but she wouldn't give up. By 3, they arranged a concilium, and after examining her again, took her to a separate unit. Lying on a special table, Kathy did, as she had been taught in the training group, endured and breathed. Patience and breathing again. "Colleagues, I believe we should do a cesarean." The older of the doctors with the beard listened worriedly to Kathy's pulse. "Risk factor, twins? No C-section." Barely able to cope with the pain, Kathy wheezed, "Soon enough." Half an hour later, the first baby was born, healthy and screaming. The second one followed, 6 minutes apart. The babies were remarkably healthy. "You, Mommy, well done," approvingly said to her nurse of the maternity ward. All such moms would be patient. Kathy and would like to answer her something, but could not. Her eyes were literally closing from fatigue. After both babies had been laid on her for a couple of minutes, and she had hugged them and whispered something affectionate in their ears, her strength had completely left her. Kathy awoke, unaccustomedly late. The sun was already high above the horizon. Recovering, she turned her head. Next to her bed were 2 glass cradles, and in each tightly sung and quietly sniffing a small living lump. Kathy got up cautiously, walked over to them, and watched them sleep for a long time, smiling. There was a quiet knock on the door, and the nurse slipped in. "You awake, Mommy? You have visitors." Vanessa came into the room, radiant and joyful, followed by the unusually quiet and cautious Liam, carrying a huge bouquet of roses. And behind him, Kathy couldn't believe her eyes. Her father-in-law was in a wheelchair, already shining like a shiny light bulb. "Didn't expect to see me?" James laughed, and then he coughed, but not hard. "Where are my little darlings?" Who's Kathy?" "Who's who?" She smiled. "No change, just like we agreed." And with a wave of her hand, she named them one by one. "James and Vanessa Brown. Please meet them." "Congratulations." Liam came up to her and kissed her awkwardly on the cheek. "Here, this is for you." He held out the bouquet. "Lisa, put it in the vase, please." Indifferently, looking at the pink armful, asked Kathy Nurse. "And congratulations to you," she said to her husband. "How cute they are." The mother-in-law smiled, leaning over the cradles. "And soon they will be able to see them closer?" Cautiously asked father-in-law, who also moved closer to the grandchildren. "We'll see them now." Kathy laughed. "But they're asleep." Protesting, Vanessa said. "That's okay," smiled Kathy. "Healthy babies sleep soundly, and besides, it's time for me to feed them." She deftly took one by one the babies, and putting them on the changing table, unwrapped them from their diapers. "Here, look at us." Little Brown yawned and pulled up like kittens and squeaked just as pitifully and thinly. "My breed," said the satisfied father-in-law when the boy squeezed the finger offered him by his grandfather with his clinging hand. "Well, hello, namesake, and who is this princess?" He would have traded on his grandchildren for a long time, but Vanessa tugged him by the sleeve. "Let's go already. The babies need to be fed, Kathy." "Oh, yes, of course." The father-in-law hustled to turn around, the nurse helped him quickly, and all the visitors disappeared behind the ward door. And Liam never said anything else. After a week, Kathy and the babies were discharged home, where they were cared for by 2 helpers and her mother-in-law. She practically moved in with them to help Kathy. In fact, the young mother needed minimal help. The children were so calm, and she herself was such a grip that she could probably have done without help at all. Liam arrived home neatly by 8 o'clock in the evening and almost always sober. He politely inquired about their day, and after looking at the children, retired to his room. Kathy moved with the twins into a larger room overlooking the sunny side of the garden. The father-in-law, who was stable, calm, and in no great pain, was often brought in. He showered them with gifts and one day told Kathy this. "Kathy, while I was in the clinic, I once had a strange dream, as if a strange old woman came to my room at dawn and laid her hands on my head. And immediately I felt so calm, so warm. From that day I recovered and went on the mend, and your herb helps well." Kathy didn't tell her father-in-law how it was, and her grandmother didn't tell her to spread the word. And Wendy, who had come into the house again, marveled at her mistress. You could see our country folk, whatever she undertakes, everything is done. She was praising Kathy on the phone, and Kathy overheard her. "Where are you Wendy from?" she asked her assistant. "Woodbury Heights. There's a village. Maybe you've heard of it." "I don't think so." Kathy wondered, "And I don't think you've heard of ours. Addicts." It's been 3 months since the babies were born when James got worse again. The prognosis was unfavorable. The doctors frowned. Probably a few more days, maybe 2 weeks. Kathy and Vanessa cried. Drove to the clinic where they had put him again, sat beside each day grieving. Kathy called the village and asked her grandmother. Maybe she would treat her father-in-law one more time. But the grandmother, who spoke on the phone, very reluctantly, conveyed to her mother that she had taken sin on her soul last time, and now there was nothing to be done. On the day of his death, James felt better, even ate a little. He talked to his relatives, apologized to them if he had offended them. Liam's lips curved, but he didn't say anything to his father. At 21 o'clock, James Brown, the founder and permanent head of his financial empire, died peacefully, surrounded by family and friends. That's what the newspapers said in the obituaries. A huge crowd gathered for the funeral. All employees, business partners, various necessary people, representatives of the authorities, and a bunch of relatives and friends. The son showed up drunk and even managed to miss, throwing a clod of earth on his father's coffin. Bastard, Vanessa said to him and cried. He tried to say something in a stammering voice, but Kathy came up and said quietly, "Please don't go away. Mother's having a hard enough time as it is. You'll come back later and apologize. You bastard." The drunken husband was indignant. "I'll get you." And he tried to hit Kathy, but slipped on the slippery clay soil and fell into the cemetery mud. He cursed, looked at his greasy clay-stained black gussie suit, got up and walked away. A couple of days later, he showed up at night with a young girl and, grinning drunkenly, told Kathy that she was going to live here. "This is my house. It's all mine, you understand?" He yelled, "And your place is in the pigsty. Go back to your stinking village. I've had enough of you. Speak quietly, please. The children are asleep." "Calm down," Kathy told him, and then handed the keys to the mansion to the maiden, who looked at the scene with insolent, drunken eyes. "Take them. I take it you'll be running the place from now on. Good night." She turned and went to her room, locking the door. "Hey, you!" her husband yelled after her. "Come back immediately, we'll talk. What are you doing with the keys to my house, huh?" He tried to follow her up the stairs, but could not do it. His legs did not obey him. To hell with her. He waved his hand and staggered to the refrigerator. "Do you want a beer?" The girl didn't refuse to keep him company. Early in the morning, Kathy, with the twins in her arms, squeamishly turned away and walked past the huge leather sofa in the hall where the couple had settled, unable to find the strength to climb the stairs to the bedroom. The cab took them to her mother-in-law's mansion, and Kathy never returned to her first family nest again. By late afternoon, a waking Liam was pelting her with calls and texts, demanding she return and bring his children, threatening her with swift reprisal in every possible way. Kathy texted him that she was ready to meet at the company office to discuss the terms of the divorce. Who did she think she was? He was furious, methodically throwing dishes from the cupboard onto the floor. "What divorce? I'll leave her without everything." No, what an idiot full of idiots. She doesn't even remember that she signed a prenup. Elsa, his young mistress, looked indifferently at his rage. She didn't care about anything at all. And soon Liam received an official notice from the lawyer about the beginning of divorce proceedings. "Dan, it's Michael, our office lawyer." Liam stared at the text in bewilderment. Is he out of his mind? And rushed to call the lawyer, but he only correctly repeated the dry wording. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Liam yelled into the phone. "Do you know that now I am in charge of the office and everywhere else?" The lawyer assured him that he was fully aware of all the facts, and advised Liam to take a closer look at his email. "You must have missed another email in the same folder, Liam," the lawyer said. "There's also a notice about the announcement of your father's will." "What?" Liam marveled. "What the hell will?" Yelping and grunting, he went through the mail again and indeed found the document he was looking for, but the information in it was only the same, only with the specification of the place and time of the appointed procedure. Kathy and Vanessa, meanwhile, were fully immersed in the simple pleasures of home. Under reliable protection in the family mansion, they spent the whole day with the children, took walks, baked cakes, and generally enjoyed the peace and company of each other. They invited Wendy, who had no intention of staying at Liam's house. It's a terrible thing to do. She complained to Kathy, not realizing she was hurting her. Every day there's debauchery, drinking, and naked girls. Ah, mark my words, Kathy, he won't end well. Often in the 2 weeks that remained before the elder Brown's will was read, William came to the mansion, and he and Kathy discussed things at length, poring over papers. The lawyer was also in attendance, and even the notary was brought in. Vanessa, preoccupied with her grandchildren, didn't even wonder what was going on. Mostly she already knew everything. Her husband had told her before his death exactly how he had disposed of his fortune, and she wasn't that interested in the details. On the appointed day and hour, all interested parties arrived at Brown's office. In the parking lot in front of the building, there was no place to fall, and the guards were exhausted, checking according to the established protocol every car coming in. "All right, ladies and gentlemen," the presiding member of the board of directors began. "Let me welcome you all today on this solemn and mournful day, when we must first of all express once again our sincere sadness at the passing of our deeply respected founding father, Brown James. I ask those present to stand and honor his memory with a moment of silence." Everyone rose, lowered their heads, and stood in silence until the chairman rang the bell. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now let me begin the extraordinary meeting of the Board of Directors of the Joint Stock Company Stavka. The agenda. While the agenda was read out, which took quite a long time, Kathy sat immersed in her thoughts and almost did not hear anything. For the umpteenth time she asked herself the same question, whether she was doing the right thing, whether she had not abused too much the trust of an old, sick, dying man who had given her and her children so many opportunities, and at the same time imposed such enormous responsibilities. Will she be able to cope with this heavy burden? And let me now introduce you to our new chairman of the board of directors. Kathy heard the words of the speaker. Liam, who was sitting almost opposite her at the huge, polished mahogany oval table, grinned contentedly and wickedly, preparing to stand up to general applause. Today he was surprisingly sober and in normal shape, shaved, combed, in an impeccably ironed navy blue suit, probably from some brand. Safu didn't know much about them. He wore a snow-white shirt and a beautiful tie, with a fashionable paisley pattern. "Now please, Brown Kathy, a round of applause, gentlemen." The gentlemen clapped, amazed as much as Liam, whose eyes were almost popping out of their orbits and his hands were treacherously trembling. Kathy stood up proudly, straightened to her short height, and raised her chin. "Please take note." The speaker spoke. "Kathy has been appointed CEO of the company by an order dated," and he gave the date. "Signed by the former CEO, James Brown. Those who wish to read it may do so." A copy of the order was passed around. People read it, quietly expressing their bewilderment, and passed it on. We will now turn the floor over to our esteemed notary, who will read the deceased's will to us. Kathy sat back in her seat, and her mother-in-law, sitting next to her, squeezed her hand encouragingly under the table. The notary, too, started from afar and spent a long time reading out the tediously long wording. Finally, he got to the point. To my son, Brown Liam, I bequeath 10% of the authorized capital of a limited liability company and a block of shares in a joint stock company in the amount of 5% of the total number of ordinary and 2% of preferred shares. Liam, in a silent frenzy, broke the Parker pen lying on the table in front of him, and the ink spilled out onto the tabletop and onto the sleeve of his snow-white shirt, spreading out in an ugly blot. To my wife, Brown Vanessa, I bequeath. Then came the enumeration of shares, amounts, and various types of movable and immovable property. The deceased did not forget about his leading employees, describing to them a bit of shares so that they would not be remembered. And finally, the notary got to the main part of the will. I bequeath the rest of my estate, whatever it may consist of, and wherever located, to my grandchildren, Brown James and Brown Vanessa, in equal shares each. And to this wording the notary deemed it necessary to clarify. Including the controlling interest in the joint stock company Stavka, until the majority of the main heirs and their executor and manager of all property is appointed their mother, Brown Kathy. That's a hell of a thing. Suddenly Liam shouted out and abruptly stood up, throwing his chair away. The people sitting next to him recoiled in fright. I will appeal against this farce. Father would never do such a thing. I assure you that the will has been drawn up in full form on the appropriate form, has been recorded in the electronic registry of the Unified Notary System, and has been properly authenticated. Important, said the notary. I don't give a damn about your registers. Liam shouted in his voice. You've got a snake on your chest. He suddenly pulled out a small revolver and pointed it at Kathy. Stop, you bastard, he said quietly and violently. The people scattered out of the office in panic. Only the notary alone sat unperturbed and glued to his seat. Papers were in disarray, lying on the desk and on the floor, and the panic was terrible. Kathy sat staring at the muzzle of the gun pointed at her, growing monstrously larger, coming closer and closer to her, and becoming horribly, horribly like a black hole. What about the children? A thought flashed through her mind, and it gave her strength. With an abrupt movement, she wriggled like a snake and slid onto the chair under the table, dragging her mother-in-law behind her with a jerk. The chair on which Vanessa was sitting fell, and she fell with it. Almost simultaneously a gunshot sounded. Again there was running, the noise of fighting, the clinking of breaking dishes. When the police and security guards, who arrived on a call, rushed into the office, Liam was already lying face down on the floor, with his hands tied with office twine, pressing the torso of the defeated criminal, with his foot to the floor, financial consultant William towering over him. And two frightened women sat under the desk, hugging each other. And the notary sat like Buddha at a small table opposite the window, guarding the will entrusted to him. Liam was in prison for 7 years for attempted murder and drug possession. Kathy took the late Brown Sr.'s place and soon learned to steer her financial ship with confidence. Partners and colleagues changed their minds 3 months after her appointment when, sensing a volatile situation on the stock market, she made a very controversial decision to sell some of the shares, and as a result their quotations rose significantly. William, her first assistant and loyal beau, is courting her, and Kathy likes it, but she is in no hurry to say yes to a man in love. The twins are growing up, and Vanessa, looking at her grandson, often cries, seeing in him a copy of her promiscuous son. But Kathy, with an iron hand, manages her wayward son, not letting him get away with it. Perhaps she will be able to do what the older Browns failed to do, to grow from a small child, a big and real man.